Thank you so much. It's great to be here. It's our first time here, so we're just getting to know the community, and thank you for coming. I'm a national correspondent for the program Sunday Morning, and it's my pleasure to let you meet my husband. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him because he's not an author. He's a senior partner at the law firm of Williams and Connolly. Bob grew up in Waukegan, Illinois, went to the University of Wisconsin and the University of Chicago Law School. He clerked for the fabulous Judge John Minor Wisdom on the Fifth Circuit of the U.S. Court of Appeals, and also for Justice Byron White on the U.S. Supreme Court. And he was a legislative assistant to Walter Mondale. He then went on to practice what is known as telephone law in our family. He supervises litigation, does crisis management, does many personal contracts, including for university presidents and TV news people, and represents, and this is why he's here, represents many authors. And this is what we're going to be talking about today. And I'll just list a few of the writers Bob represents. Presidents George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. First Ladies Laura Bush, Hillary Clinton, Michelle Obama. Cabinet secretaries like James Baker, Madeleine Albright, and Robert Rubin. Heroes like General David Petraeus, also former director of the CIA, Admiral Bill McRaven, Anthony Fauci. Journalists like Bob Woodward, David Brooks, Juan Williams, Peggy Noonan. This list goes on. Business leaders like Barry Diller and Indra Nooyi. Novelists like the late Mary Higgins Clark and James Patterson. And the list goes on and on. So, in fact, how many authors do you represent, do you think?
Probably about 300. But realize that at any given time, there are only sort of 2 in play because they take a long time to write the book.
So whatever you do, don't call Bob an agent. So how did you get into publishing, and why are you not an agent?
Thank you all for being here. I see some friends who I appreciate your presence. They gave me this name tag that says I'm a writer. I am not a writer. I can write legal, but I'm not creative. And the problem is whenever I try to write something, it ends up with the phrase res ipsa loquitur in it. Nobody wants to read it. I started doing this in 1984, 85. I've done 10 presidential campaigns since '76. In '84, I was running the Gerry Ferraro debate prep team. You remember she debated Bush 41, first woman on national ticket. We got to become great friends because I played Bush in the rehearsals, and my job was to drive her crazy, and so that ended up being a lot of fun. And even though they lost, everybody wanted her. First woman, smart, funny, beautiful, future. And so I hired an agent to help do a book deal. I didn't know anything about a book deal. And we did the deal and got the largest advance that at that time for any memoir, political or otherwise. And then when David Stockman, you people remember David Stockman, came out of the Reagan administration, I saw what the agent had done, and I said to myself, why should somebody pay 15% for that? They should pay legal fees, which is how I charge.
Big legal fees.
Big legal fees. Extremely large legal fees. So I auditioned to be the representative, and David hired me, and then I'd done one Republican, one Democrat, and it went on from there. And of course, when I got James Patterson, who's the biggest fiction writer in history, 400 million books, it became a critical mass, and I kept getting other people and interesting people. And I differ from an agent in 3 respects. First, as I said, I don't charge a commission. Don't believe in that. Second, I'm bound by legal ethics. And third, I do the rollout. So for instance, when Woodward came out last year and you saw him on TV shows and podcasts and radio and print, I, along with the publisher, designed that whole plan for them. Agents don't do that. So in that way, I'm different, and I feel I charge fairly big legal fees.
As you mentioned, one of your sidelines has been doing debate prep for presidents and vice presidents. And you, in fact, played the role of Dick Cheney.
3 times.
Yes, against who?
Lieberman and Edwards, and I think that was it, too.
But then you went on to represent Vice President Cheney. Talk about that.
Well, I've ended up representing Liz and Mary and Dick and Lynn. We became friends, and he always, when he introduces me to someone, he always says, this is the guy who played me, and he didn't do any good job, and I won the debate, and I say, no, you didn't. And I'm one of the few people, I'm blessed being one of the few people in Washington with a bipartisan law practice. Almost nobody has that. It's so polarized. And I've been blessed to represent everybody from Mitch McConnell to Michelle Obama and in between. And the Cheneys are an example. I not only am politically very different from them, but I actually sought to defeat him by playing his part in the debate prep. So I've been very lucky to be able to represent people on all sides. People ask, how do you do it? I say, when you go to a dentist, you don't ask, are you a Republican or a Democrat? You ask, can you pull my tooth? And hopefully I've been able to pull the teeth sufficiently that they keep coming back.
As you mentioned, you represented all the Cheneys, and particularly Liz on her recent book, Oath and Honor. How does it feel to have so many of the people in the Republican Party vilify her? And what do you think of the pardons that President Biden gave not only her, but several of your clients?
Yeah, I represent Fauci. In fact, that's probably the reason I'm here, because I arranged for Tony to come. Sadly, when President Trump decided to pull his security, that was the end of the trip, which was very unfortunate, because all of you would have really enjoyed Tony. And if you want, read the book, because it's a heck of a book. And then I represent Mark Milley, and I represent Liz Cheney, and they all have been the target of serious security threats. Mark Milley has a fatwa against him. If you kill him, you get to go meet the virgins in heaven. And that does tend to encourage some people. Tony, public knowledge, they've 3 times caught people with rifles, with his address, on the way to his house. And so President Trump, in his wisdom, decided these, what I think are heroes, are not deserving of protection. And it's very sad. And I talk to them every day, and it's just changed their lives, ruined their lives. Trump even ordered Milley's portrait taken down. Think about the pettiness of that. So it's a difficult time for these people, and I really feel for them. And I feel the same way if it was the other side. You just don't do that, but he's done it.
What do you think about the pardons President
Well,
Biden gave?
we were very happy that Tony and Mark Milley and Liz and the whole committee, not just Liz, got those pardons, because that in the campaign, Trump and his people, Kash Patel and others, had made it very clear that they were going to go after these people by name, specific offenses. Trump even accused Milley of treason, and that's a capital offense. So in the normal course, I wouldn't seek to do this. I wouldn't think it's necessary, but given the announced intentions, it was, I think, very fortunate for these people and very fair that the criminal aspect was taken off the table. Now, don't think they're out of the zone, because there can still be congressional hearings. He's already ordered an investigation of Milley by the Inspector General, which isn't off the table because of the pardon. So they're going to do whatever they can to jerk these people around for as long as they can. And it's what the American people chose, and now we're seeing the results, sadly.
Just a sideline, this is not about publishing, but you often advise people when they're leaving government. Why do you need to do that?
Yeah, that's a whole other practice. Maybe we'll go the Rancho Mirage post-governmental seminar. That can involve everything from books, obviously, to speaking tours, to university presidencies, to boards of directors, to advisory boards, to academic, to financial institutions. Examples, and I'm not speaking out of school, which I don't do, it's all public knowledge. For Millie, we arranged arrangement with J.P. Morgan Chase, a professorship at Georgetown, a professorship at Princeton, and a private equity firm. For Fauci, 2 appointments at Georgetown and speaking, and the book, of course. Millie's not yet doing a book. I hope he will. And we help them. We're not headhunters. We don't find these opportunities, but we do the deals. We negotiate the deals. We paper them. We enforce them. And we've done this for dozens and dozens of senators, congresspeople, cabinet members, presidents, and it's a fun practice. And a lot of these people have never been in the private sector, ever. And so they need help finding the right contract to fit with the opportunities that are offered to them.
And also, you make sure they don't run afoul of government ethics laws, right?
Yeah, there's very, very difficult, although under this
who knows now?
they've just repealed them all. While you're still in the chair, there are rules, and when you leave the chair, there are rules, and nothing that the other side would rather do than find a violation of one of those rules and put it on the front page of the New York Times. So we try to help them navigate the very Byzantine but important ethic constraints that exist for post-governmental work.
Is there anyone you just won't represent?
Yeah, I turned down almost all the Trump people, with one exception, Robert O'Brien, who I thought stayed in there and probably kept us from nuclear war in the last 2 months. So
His job was?
He went and started a consulting firm. He was National Security Advisor. Yeah, he was national. And I think he did, I don't agree with him politically, but I think he did a brave thing and the right thing, and I like him personally. But the other ones, some cabinet members, some White House people, I just didn't want any part of. I don't agree with a lot of the people that come to me for this representation, but I want to always believe they're good people and well-intentioned and people I like. So I turn down the ones that make me not proud to tell my grandchildren that I represent them.
While we're on that topic,
And if I have to tell Rita that I represent.
and what happens when someone you really like and respect comes to you with a book that you don't think you can get published, or they just want to write a book, but they don't know what the book is about? I mean, talk about that.
Yeah, I since I started doing this and getting the articles and things and the press releases, I probably get 20 a week over the transom. Not one of them is viable. But I always read them. I always write back, because I think if they've spent the time to put it together and contact me, they deserve the dignity of a response, and I give them an honest response.
But there are good friends who do that too.
Yeah, well, we always have this thing. We're at a cocktail party or something, and invariably somebody comes up and says, "Everyone says I should write a book." And I say, "Are any of them publishers?" And the other thing that Rita knows that I do, they come up and they say, "I've got a great memoir and I'd love you to represent me." And I go, "Too much sex and violence, sorry." And their spouse laughs, and then we go away. But no, you have to, I take on only ones where I think I can make a difference and be successful. And it's better to disappoint at the front than the back, if you know what I mean. I'd rather be honest with them and tell them my assessment and tell them maybe this is for a university press, or maybe this is for a self-publishing, or this is a small publisher. I don't do that sector, but I try to point them in the right direction. But I only take ones that I think I can do the right thing. And with novelists, I get all kinds of first novels, and I only take on established novelists where my way of charging saves them sometimes millions of dollars. And I know that they have a track record. But it's hard to say no to people because they have spent, in some cases, years putting together these ideas. And everybody they know is telling them, I should write a book. But I have to be the one to tell them the truth.
So how does one go about selling a book to a publisher in this day and age?
Yeah, you start, there are a lot of ways, but being generalizing, you start with a proposal. Now, this is someone who isn't, established writer with a series and everybody knows what the next thing's going to be. That's easy. But if you're talking about sort of, as we lawyers say, ab initio, you start with a proposal. A proposal is basically a sales document. It says, here's a summary of the book, here's who I am, here are the chapters and a couple paragraphs about each.
Do you work with authors to craft those?
I try my best to help shape them into the form that I know the publishers will find appealing. And then I'll tell you what I'm doing right now. I won't say the author, but it's a person who wrote a book 15 years ago that is still in the top 150 on Amazon, 50 years later, and he's finally written another book. So we did a proposal, and we went, in his case, to 10 publishers who I knew the particular editor at each publisher. Now there are 5 publishing houses and a whole bunch of imprints and some independents, but mainly it's the 5 umbrella organizations. And I went to editors who I knew would find his subject appealing and be excited about this amazing seller that's now coming back with a new book in 15 years. And we got yeses from every one of them, which rarely happens. And then we had meetings, excellent meetings, which we prepare for, and we go over the questions in advance. And then all of them said they wanted to bid, which is very unusual. And literally Monday, we'll have an auction with 10 bidders. And the way a literary auction works, as I do it, is by close of business today, every one of them will send a first offer. That buys a seat at the table. And then beginning at 10 a.m. on Monday, I call the low offeror, and I ask him or her if they want to top the high offeror. And that process continues till you identify the highest bidder. The longest one I've ever had was 21 days. Wow. With, you remember James Carville and Mary Madeline? And the publishers one-upped me on that one because it went on 21 days, and it ended up being what's called Little Random, which is the Random House imprint at the Random House conglomerate, and Simon & Schuster. And Alberto Vitali, who at the time was head of Random House, and Dick Snyder, who at the time was the head of Simon & Schuster, called each other and said, this is bullshit. Why should we let him keep doing this? Let's publish it together. And it's the first book that has this, on the spine the logo Random House and Simon & Schuster. And I went on to do the same thing with, we'll talk about this later, Clinton and Patterson, where you see the Knopf and the Simon, it's a dual imprint, if you will, a made-up imprint for purposes of this. But the other way you can do it is the way, and again, not speaking out of school, public knowledge, Bill Clinton knew the publisher he wanted, he knew the editor he wanted, he knew the price he wanted, and we had a meeting. He was playing golf down in Florida, and we had a meeting with Robert Gottlieb and Sonny Maida at Knopf, and he wanted Gottlieb because Gottlieb was Catherine Graham's editor, and he believed, as I believe, that her book is probably the best memoir of modern history, won the Pulitzer Prize. And we knew the price, and we were supposed to have a 45-minute meeting, lasted 3.5 hours. And we got the price, and we made the deal. So we didn't have any auction. We didn't have any talk to other publishers. So at one end, you can do unilateral placement. At one end, you can do an auction. And in between, you can go to 2 and see who you like best. A lot of ways to do it, but the fundamental patterns are the unilateral placement and the auction.
A lot of famous people seem to work with collaborators. How do you arrange that? And what happens when the collaboration goes south?
Yeah, no, a lot of, well, the premier example of working with collaborators is James Patterson. And as you know, when you look at his books, it's James Patterson and always another, not always, but often another name, equal size. What Jim does, and this is unique, he does a 60 to 80 page single-spaced outline of all the characters, all the chapters, all the events. He gives it to collaborator. Collaborator does a first draft, and then he rewrites it 5 or 6 times to make it his own. With some, like the Alex Cross books and the terrific memoir he did, he writes it himself. But the collaborators...
What about presidents or people like that?
You try to... Often they have people who've worked with them and written for them. That's fine. I have a list of, I think, 125 collaborators that I've worked with. I don't represent them, but they know how to do this. And if someone is without a collaborator but wants to work with a collaborator, I give them 5 or 6 resumes from my master list, and they see who they like, and then they interview them and they decide. And then you make an agreement with the collaborator. It can be a fixed fee, it can be a percentage of profits, it can be a percentage of advance, it can have bonuses. It's a complex relationship. And more often than not, it works out. The famous example of it not working out is Pamela Harriman, who had...
But she wasn't your author.
She was not, no, I had nothing to do with this, but she was a close friend of Edward Bennett Williams, who founded our law firm. And Ed told her, get a contract with this collaborator. You know, no, I don't care, I know. So it went south. He had the tapes. He wrote a book, and that's how she got the nickname of, what was it, courtesan to the diplomats or something, and it was a terrible book. And so you have to solidify that relationship with a solid contract. You can't take any chances. But I'd say, 9 times out of 10, it works out just fine. But it's an interesting relationship. And the key with these people who are really good at it, and there are several people who are just geniuses at capturing voice. And to the extent that this collaborator can capture the author's voice, it makes it such a better book. And it's also important that the author not check out, that they actually review every word and add their own way of saying things and add more stories that make it more personal. And
Do you review the books?
yeah, I do. I don't. I should say when the author wants me to. I do. Yeah, I don't. I don't.
Drafts?
Yeah, I do. I often do and give notes. But Bob Woodward doesn't have me look at his drafts.
But does Bob Woodward tell you all his secrets?
No. He's very careful, and that's perfectly fine, even though we have attorney-client privilege. But some of the authors, I read the first draft and the second draft, and I love doing that. And sometimes they accept my ideas, sometimes they don't. But it's a fun role if the author feels that they can benefit from it.
Can you tell, once the book is written, if it will be a bestseller?
Usually, yeah. I usually can. I've done this for a long time, and I can... Almost all, that sounds immodest, almost all the books I do make the New York Times list. Not all of them, but I would say most of them. And I can generally tell whether in the end they're going to appeal to sufficient numbers to become quote unquote bestsellers. It only takes New York Times list is a function of velocity, it's a function of numbers, it's a formula that they don't disclose. We don't know which stores report. But you can get on the list 5,000 copies in a slow week. When you're talking about the main spring and fall season, it might take 15,000 to get on the list for a week. And pre-orders are a big part of this. The books that I've got coming this year that aren't out, you can still order them if they're on Amazon.
Talk about those books.
Those books? Okay, well, let me tell you about this. The pre-orders dump into the count on the first week. So if you build up a good pre-order, that really helps you get on the list in the first week. So we spend a lot of time on pre-order efforts. Now, next, what have I got coming? I've got coming Justice Anthony Kennedy, who, as you probably know, for several years was the court. He was the fifth vote. I've got Barry Diller, who is, Mr. Entertainment in every way. He ran a studio at age 29. I've got Graydon Carter, who was Spy Magazine, Vanity Fair, on the history of all that, and it's a wonderful read. I've got Lloyd Blankfein, who for years ran Goldman Sachs. You probably know that name. I've got the third Clinton Patterson, which is actually the best of the three, really good, called The First Gentleman, which we didn't get, but the book, the book has one. And Jim Patterson's doing a novel with Viola Davis, which is terrific, about a Southern judge. I mean, it's written, it's clearly her, and it's clearly going to be a movie. And it's about a Southern judge who gets caught in a case that has profound national implications and all these difficult decisions. It'll be wonderful. And Jim and Viola promoting together will be great. We did the deal with Dolly Parton and James Patterson. If you haven't read that one, you should. A lot of fun. She was great, promoted it, and wrote 9 original songs, the lyrics of which are part of the book, and then did an album of the songs. So we had the synergism of music and literature. And then I did Louise Penny and Hillary Clinton, who wrote one together, which also was another one with 2 logos on the spine. But good, all good books, all fun books, I recommend.
So how did a Washington lawyer come to represent James Patterson?
Jim liked the model. Recently we did a 22-book deal, which lasts 2 years. Think about that, all of you who write one book every, so without disclosing the numbers, you can do the math. And Jim, I believe, liked the model of not paying 15% to someone, rather paying legal fees. And so his at that time, I think it was his editor who recommended me. We got along great. We've been now close friends for 20 years, and Sue, his wife, and Rita, and I, we're all friends.
And sometimes you're even a character in his books because he wants to know if you've read them. He doesn't tell Bob in advance. He just puts him in as a character. What have you been?
I've been a judge. I've been a guy who saves the planet. I've been, let's see, I think I've been a criminal. But it's fun. You read along, there you are. And yeah, he does do that, which is really fun.
And then, again, another person that you wouldn't expect Bob to represent, Barbara Streisand.
Yeah.
How did you get her as a client?
Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. She started 9 years ago and was a little late, because usually it's a year. And it came in at 1,800 pages, I think. And Rick Cott, the fabulous editor at Viking, took it down to 1,000 and literally retired from the business. It's an amazing book. It's the history of show business. But the thing about Barbara is we had 3 different products. We had the book, which is story after story after. She knew everybody. She participated in show business in all its forms with everybody. But then she wanted to read the audio herself, which shocked me because it's 48 hours of recording in a studio of that audio. And as she'd be going along, she'd be going, and then I went to the delicatessen for lunch. Let me tell you about their corned beef sandwich. And she'd go off script and talk about whatever it is she was writing about. So we had a second product because the fans wanted that. Then she didn't feel there were enough pictures in the book because you can only put a certain number of inserts. So she put 58 extra pages of pictures in the ebook. So that's a third product. So we basically have with Barbara, and I recommend the book. It is, if you like show business, it's an amazing read. But we have 3 different products based on the one book because of the nature of Barbara. And she designed the cover, she designed the print, the pagination, obviously the picture insert, every aspect of it is her. She wrote it herself, and it is a genuine manifestation of this person who's won every award, done every form of entertainment, has been part of all of our lives for all of our lives, in all shapes and forms. So I recommend that to you. But it was not somebody I thought I'd end up working with, but it was a lot of fun.
How do you keep the amounts authors are paid from becoming public?
Yeah, the agents traditionally put it out to sort of aggrandize themselves, all due respect. I don't, because I am bound by client confidentiality. And unless you're a public figure and have to file a disclosure report, you have no choice, my advances generally don't get out. And that's in the best interest of the author. It's nobody's business what they get for the book. And the wild speculation that occurs, is especially in page 6, New York Post, is often very funny to watch. But we generally are able to keep them confidential, and the authors benefit from that, I think.
It was reported that the Obamas sold their books as a package for like $65 million. And Michelle Obama's book sold about $10 million.
The dollar, not dollar.
I mean, 10 million books. And President Obama's book sold far less, about 2.5 million, depending on which, source you go to. Is there competition between spouses?
Well, she actually, I think she's up to 15 million, and he's, I think, at 9 million.
Oh, okay.
They were very different books, though, in fairness. He had written Dreams, which is one of the terrific young coming-of-age memoirs. That was before my time working with him. And she'd never written that kind of book. So her book was a unique growing-up memoir. His was the presidency, and it was the first half of the presidency. There's still a second volume to come. So they weren't, it was apples and oranges.
Yeah, but don't you think she said, my book sold more than your book?
I wasn't.
Don't you think?
I wasn't there. I wasn't there. I wasn't there for that. But it didn't surprise me because he had been president. He'd given 1,000 interviews, and she was still very much a mysterious figure and wasn't out there all the time. And if you read the book, it's really a terrific book. I'm sure some of you have read it.
Didn't Laura Bush's book sell more than George?
No,
Yeah.
it didn't. His actually sold about, I think, 3 million. And he always says, I can't imitate him like somebody like Meacham and Karl Rove can, but he always said, people think I can't even read a book, much less write a book. And he came up with this fabulous idea of not writing a traditional memoir, but taking 13 decisions. The book's called Decision Points. And he took 13 decisions and he explained those decisions. And in the course of discussing those decisions, you learn a lot about what you'd get in a traditional memoir. Why did I decide it this way? Or why did I ask that fellow or whatever? And it was a brilliant concept. And it sold a lot of books. And her book did very well. I can't remember what hers sold, but hers did very well too, because she was really well liked. And of course, Hillary's done now 9 books, and President Clinton's done about 6. The latest one's called Citizen. It's a memoir of his post-White House years. And their books are very different, but they both have a real audience and a real following still.
Does any editor or publisher ever dare say to a president or first lady, look, this isn't very good, you have to do better?
Yes, definitely.
Yes?
Yeah. In each case, I make sure with people like that, or secretaries of Treasury, secretaries of State, these people who are used to running their worlds, I always try to put them with an editor who I know will stand up to them and tell them the truth. In the end, the author decides what they want in there. But yeah, we have some, and sometimes, for instance, Obama's editor, a woman named Rachel Clayman, relatively young woman, she stands right up to him, tells it like it is. and he respects it. And that's, most of these people want that. Their staff doesn't think they want that, but they do want that, and it makes for a better book. But no, we try to set these high-level people up with editors who really have extremely important input.
It's famous that Robert Gottlieb told Clinton what?
Yeah, well, this was fab. You all, some of you, I'm sure, for Robert. He's Robert Caro's editor and many others. So we pick Knopf, we pick Robert Caro, and we go in for the first meeting. Clinton tells me to come along, so it's me, Gottlieb, and Clinton. And Clinton launches off on about a 10-minute speech on how you write a book. And Gottlieb waits about 10 minutes, and then he goes, Bill, he always called him Bill. None of us ever do. You call someone Mr. President until they tell you not to. And I certainly call them that. He says, Bill, you work for me. And then he wrote the first 100 pages. We had another meeting, three of us, and Gottlieb goes, Bill, you don't have to say the name of the grandchild of every person you've ever met. And then he writes the second 100, this is in Gottlieb's book. And then he writes the second 100 pages, he goes in there and he says, Bill, are you making this shit up? So that was an example of somebody who tells it like it is.
You first started in publishing, 40 years ago, believe it or not. How has the industry changed in all that time?
Well, it's so different. The pandemic almost killed publishing. What kept publishing alive was cookbooks, children's books, and big fiction. That ultimately was what kept the industry alive. There were some non, Woodward and Obama, but generally that's what, not that other books didn't sell, but the big fiction, the cookbooks, and the children's books kept it alive. When I started doing this, there were no ebooks. There weren't really audiobooks. The ones that were on tape. And you didn't have Amazon, which has completely changed the market. Probably 75 to 80% of books are bought on Amazon. And that's I think, a big, big factor in the state of publishing now. Independent
bookstores are beginning to come back.
They're
right?
coming back. They're absolutely coming back. You're correct. That's a great thing. Nothing I like better than going in an independent bookstore and actually looking at the books. And I only read paper books. I never read ebooks. I never listen to audiobooks. That's not me. I like the book and I read the book.
But a few years back, in fact, I did a Sunday morning piece about, is publishing going to be gone, the way of the dinosaurs? I mean, what do you think was responsible for bringing publishing back?
Just a good book.
Yeah.
Simple as that. People still crave wonderful stories. They can be nonfiction, they can be fiction. Authors like him who entertain them and
Yes.
and they love it. And I see others here too. They just want to read a good book. And I hope that we spend so much time in the early getting our grandchildren to read and giving them books, and Rita and I just reading to them. And I just assume all of you are here because you love books, and it's just so important to drill into the next generation that the phone is not the answer, that you gotta, and see, my solution to that, I'll show you my solution to that is this.
Don't try to text him.
No, you can't text. It's wonderful. There's no text.
So are books you work on ever changed into movies or become movies?
Yeah, Patterson's had some books made into movies. I am not, with my fiction writers, it's one thing, fiction. But with the nonfiction books, I discourage it. Mrs. Graham had 65 offers to turn her book into a movie. Phil Knight, Shoe Dog, has had 50 offers from studios and streamers and directors and stars and writers and producers. You lose control. The contract they force you to sign does not let you have ultimate control. And by definition, a book like Phil Knight's book, like Katharine Graham's, the list goes on, they're personal, and you don't want them misinterpreted on the screen. I'll give you again, not speaking out of school, public knowledge. I did a book called Icebound. You probably don't remember this woman, Dr. Jerry Nielsen, but you may remember the story. She was a scientist who was at the pole and developed breast cancer and came within a week of having to perform a self-mastectomy. And in an unbelievable effort, the Air Force rescued her, even during the closed time at the pole. And everybody wanted this book. And I said, don't do it, Jerry, don't do it. But Susan Sarandon entered the picture and romanced her and got her to do it. The movie ended up portraying her as going to the pole to abandon her family, having an affair with a scientist at the pole, none of which was true. It destroyed her life, totally destroyed her life. And that lesson for me was no movies on my nonfiction books. And I mean, Bill Clinton, you can imagine how many offers we've had. It goes on, but, and sometimes it's their choice and they overrule me, and that's fine. Now, Patterson, for instance, had all kinds of movies. He's got a whole bunch in production right now. The first Clinton Patterson it's being shot now, actually. And Kwame Alexander, who I represent, has had movies made. Mary Higgins Clark has had movies made. So fiction, fine, but nonfiction, it gets very, very dicey, I think.
Now, this is a tricky one. I mean, do you have an absolute favorite author?
Yeah.
Yes.
Back probably 20 years ago, there was a little boy named Matty Stepanek. Matty had muscular dystrophy, and his mother had muscular dystrophy, and he lost 2 siblings to muscular dystrophy. You remember the Jerry Lewis telethons? He was the Jerry Lewis poster boy 2 years in a row. Matty, at the time I met him, was probably 8.
He was made famous by Oprah, right?
Yeah, I'm going to tell about that. If an angel came to earth, it would be Matty. This kid was amazing, and he wrote poetry. And the poems were adult-like. He was a protege, and he was in the hospital, at Children's Hospital in D.C., and was dying, and one of these groups came, and he got 3 wishes. One wish was to have his poems published. Second wish was to be on Oprah. Third wish was to meet Jimmy Carter, who he considered a peacemaker. And so a little publisher in Alexandria did a pamphlet of his poems. I wasn't involved. And then Oprah read about this, and he was on Oprah. And Oprah called me and said, can you get him a real deal? So we got him a 5-book deal, all of which made the New York Times bestseller list. Oprah, in amazing generosity, both of them were in wheelchairs. Oprah bought him as a gift a van that both wheelchairs could go in.
His mom.
His mom. And Jenny could drive him around the country to do book appearances. And he was on Good Morning America with Diane Sawyer to promote his book, and we arranged for Jimmy Carter to come out behind the curtains. So he got all 3 lit.
So we're almost out of time.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to ask you, for all these people who dream of becoming authors, should they call you?
No. Too much sex and violence.
All right. Well, we're almost out of time. Thank you so much. You were a great audience.